Calliope's Tale by FalcomReynolds. Chapter 11. Winds of War. The next time they sailed to Baroni Hacker, they found it in ruins. Not all of it. The central districts were unharmed, but the outer edges of the city had been torn to shreds, wooden buildings shattered, and waters still turbid with sediment and stinking of death. There were crews of people trying to sift through the sodden wreckage for possessions or bodies. The Midnight Sun's crew was silent as they passed by the outer reaches of the port and into the docks. "What happened?" Ianthe said, horrified, as she leaned over the railing. Calliope poked her head out of the water, tipping it just a hair to the side. "It's not supposed to look like that, right?" she called up. Ianthe shook her head. Calliope narrowed her eyes, then dove. The seabed was a mess. Coral had been ripped up and strewn across the sand. The waters were still turbid from catastrophe. She could see the skeletons of fish that had suffocated in dirt and been eaten by worms lying between the rocks. Ianthe frowned. "A storm did this. But how? This has never happened before. At least, as far as I know." "This wasn't us, was it?" Mikolo asked, surveying the damage. "No!" Ianthe shook her head. "This is hurricane damage. I can't even make those. Even if I could, it would have to be with me. And I would never. It's far too dangerous. Something else did this." She narrowed her eyes, and Calliope only just managed to catch her words. "Or someone." Calliope was allowed into the harbor this time, because the Lizarin wasn't there. She stayed near the ship, watching the ships that sailed in and out. There were hardly any. The ships that were here were being repaired. Nearly all of them were damaged in some capacity. Ianthe was immediately summoned, before the sun had even finished tying up. Calliope saw the red-clothed messenger waiting on the quayside, and watched her bow to Ianthe and lead her away. She submerged herself under the dark planks and waited for the first mate to return. It took some time, but she did. Calliope surfaced next to the dock and put her hands on the edge of it, digging her claws into the wood. "What's going on?" she asked, as Ianthe strode past her and out to the ship. Ianthe's face was bleak as she stopped before the gangplank and turned to face Calliope. "A Lizarin," she said, jaw set, and the word hissed in the air. "The Peacebringers called him in to question him. They underestimated him, as everyone does." Calliope was silent. "He fled, and built this storm to cover his retreat. The sisters and their servants managed to protect part of the city, but the outer districts were destroyed." Ianthe shook her head, turning, one hand repeatedly buttoning and unbuttoning the cuff of her left coat sleeve. "He tore a city to shreds to escape retribution. He won't be allowed here again. But people died in that storm, and either they're lost or he took their souls with him. The sisters have a bounty out for him." "Where is he now?" Ianthe turned and strode up the gangplank, voice harder than black ocean stone. "Gone." They spent several days in Baroni Hacker, waiting, gathering information. Even the royal fleets were willing to ally with the pirates now, because a Lizarin's storm had sunk 3 of their ships. That was enough to push them over the edge, to declare that an enemy of an enemy is a friend. Calliope listened. The fleet was rallying around several flagships. The Curse of the North was one of them, a strange ship covered in heavy iron plating and with no sails. Instead, she had circular towers on her abnormally tall deck that belched white and gray clouds whenever she moved. She was captained by Denzel Helice, a tall, well-dressed man, with hair in thick dreadlocks tied back with golden ribbon that fell halfway down his back over his embroidered waistcoat. He was a gifted captain as well, gifted in the same way Ianthe was, though his power did not deal with the gods of the sea. He had come down from beyond the equator, past that boiling heat, from a place so far away he said that the seas froze like it did in the far south, that his ironclad ship had to force its way through the icebergs even in the summer. Calliope believed him. He radiated cold the way the sun did light. The Queen's bounty was another, and this one Calliope hated. It was a crown ship, and the captain on board treated every pirate she met with disdain and distaste. Calliope had to stop herself from darting out from beneath the quay and grabbing the captain's ankle to trip her, or drag her into the bay. Where Denzel and Ayanthe felt like power, this captain, Kiara Zedane, oozed superiority. She held that superiority over her crew and the crew of the other crown ships, and they obeyed her. But it was clear how she thought of the pirates, and the fact that her authority meant little to them. The third captain of the collected fleet was younger, relatively new to the seas, Sun Yang, who dressed in blue robes embroidered with golden dragons. Their ship was called Le Yuan de Weigong, made of dark wood and ivory. Calliope disliked the material, but was fond of the captain, who got along easily with anyone, even the Kiara. "The pirate of yours," Kiara said, with a curl in her lip, as she and the other captains stood on the shore and Calliope lurked against a patch of dark rocks underneath the docks where they stood and listened to them. Her accent was clipped and sharp, and she did not try to hide the discomfort and suspicion in her voice. "How do you know they aren't working with him?" The other two captains exchanged a glance. "You cannot be serious," Denzel said after a moment, raising one dark eyebrow. He killed one of my crew members." "Yes, but he does that to his own crew. It's barbaric, but why should he treat you any different?" "Captain Zedane, I understand you think all pirates are savages. I assure you this is not the case. Alizarin is an anomaly, and one that we'll seek to eliminate as swiftly as possible." Sun Yang spoke up. "I was not here for the storm, but I can see its devastation. He clearly has no respect for this place, or for the sisters. Even you answer to them. Why would you think we are with him when we benefit from this place as you do? Why would we want to destroy it?" Kiara pursed her lips, frowning. Very well. But we have no leads." "He's gone north," Sun Yang said. "That's all we know." "How do we know that?" "The storm followed him." "And that's not just a coincidence." "He called the storm," Sun Yang said with a frown. "It was under his control. Of course it followed him." "Storms are not his gift." A slight pause. Denzel coughed slightly. "No," he said, and Calliope could see the slats of the dock where his breath caused the air to cloud. "He pulls his power from, shall we say, other sources." "Such as?" Kiara crossed her arms, raising one eyebrow. "The souls of the dead," Sun Yang said bluntly, "which is why we cannot die to him." Kiara said, looking down. Calliope went still, hoping the captain couldn't see her through the gaps between the dock boards. "Difficult to deprive him of this source, then. We can't exactly kill them." "No. We will have to fight him the ordinary way. But we'll have to overpower him, which will be difficult, given his augmented ship," Denzel mused, rubbing the side of his jaw, the other hand hidden behind his back. "With a fleet, however, it will be easier than it would be otherwise. Captain Zidane, I appreciate your cooperation in this matter. If he intends to continue to terrorize the port, which is my fleet's safe haven in these—" She paused, lip curling in disgust. "These waters infested with predators, then I will see him caught and set to justice." Denzel half smiled, raising one eyebrow. "I find it amusing that you and your fleet are so frightened of sea beasts," he said. "The sea beasts are not to what I refer." Kiara swiveled on her heel and strode off the dock. "You know that. You knew that," Sun Yang said, once she was out of earshot. "Oh, yes, of course," Denzel said. "I was just curious to see if she would insult me to my face, and how badly, and to test her flair for the dramatic." It wasn't that terrible, Sun Yang said. No, it wasn't. We shouldn't have much of an issue with that. Denzel turned, heading for his own ship. And when dealing with an enemy of this magnitude, we should count ourselves lucky to have Crown assistance. Sun Yang snorted. This would not be the first time I've had such help, they said. Oh? You'll have to tell me about it. Perhaps it can give us some tips for dealing with her. Oh, be kind, Sun Yang said, as they strode away with Denzel out of Calliope's hearing range. Just give her a chance. She may yet warm to us. Denzel's soft chuckle echoed over the waves, and then they were gone. From then on, Bruni Hakir served as a center for the fleet. The ships gathered there, and the captains plotted. The Midnight Sun found itself under Denzel Helice. Calliope liked him well enough. He was calm and collected and treated all of Makulo's crew with respect. This is a strong ship, he said, standing on the deck of the Midnight Sun as she bobbed gently in the port waters. He was tall, taller than Ianthe or Makulo, and it was strange to see him in the middle of a familiar setting. The crew moved around him, wary, uncertain, respectful, awed. The Midnight Sun, yes? And you are the captain? He was speaking with Ianthe. She shook her head. Not me, she said, and jerked her head to the side where Makulo was speaking quietly with Lang and another newer crewmate called Kavi. Him. And his name? Winthrop Makulo. How did he come by this ship? He claimed it from its previous captain during a suicidal mission to the South Pole. He mutinied? Effectively, yes, Ianthe begrudgingly admitted. But it was for his own good and the good of the crew. His previous captain was insane. Is he gifted? Not in the way we are, no. But he does possess a certain empathy. Ianthe glanced over again. Makulo rested one hand on Kavi's shoulder and smiled at her. She dipped her head in assent before darting off to complete whatever task he had assigned her. Denzel watched her go. Interesting, he mused. And your power? Comes from the goddesses. Denzel glanced around at the busy deck. For a moment, there was a relative silence, only the sound of the waves and the work around them. Calliope cupped her hands around her finned ear to try and pick up any quieter mutterings and pressed herself to the side of the ship. How did you kill the serpent? Denzel finally asked. Ianthe was shocked into silence. Calliope could hear it in the sudden catch in her breath. What? She asked. The serpent, Denzel said casually. It was the tone of the voice that would hide warning in it if it were anyone but him. But his words held only curiosity. You sold it here in port, or so I was told. Who killed it? Ianthe glanced over to Makulo. Calliope saw her head swing around and back again. His harpoon crossbow dealt the blow, she said carefully. It was an invention. Yes, I know, Denzel interrupted calmly, without impatience. He knew Ianthe was mincing her words to hide something. That much was clear. His words weren't threatening, just curious. But who wielded it? I know it wasn't you. And it certainly wasn't him, or he'd be carrying it. Which of your crew? Calliope considered the situation. It was clear that Ianthe didn't know whether to reveal her presence or not. While Calliope knew personally she would have been an asset to the fleet, she would also be in danger of assassination by other captains or crown pirates. Perhaps we could speak privately, Ianthe said. It was me, Calliope yelled from the water's edge. There was another silence, followed by footsteps, as Denzel stepped over to the edge of the boat and looked down. Calliope bobbed on the swell and waved, grinning. She had to give him credit. He kept his composure, raising an eyebrow down at her. Interesting, he said, glancing over to Ianthe. And this would be? No, sorry, Ianthe, but I can speak for myself. Down here, please. I'm Calliope. I'm with Ianthe and the sun. The look on Ianthe's face was caught somewhere between fear and resignation. "Well met," Denzil called down. "Is there perhaps an easier way to speak than shouting back and forth from the ship's rail?"